Here no doubt he met Loughton and Swiveller, Chuckster and Wobbler, in so far as such sacred creatures ever had embodiments on this lower earth. But it is typical of him that he had no fancy at all to remain a solicitor's clerk. The resolution to rise which had glowed in him even as a dawdling boy when he gazed at Gad's Hill, which had been darkened but not quite destroyed by his fall into the factory routine, which had been released again by his return to normal boyhood and the boundaries of school, was not likely to content itself now with the copying out of agreements. He set to work, without any advice or help, to learn to be a reporter. He worked all day at law and all night at shorthand. It is an art which can only be effected by time, and he had to effect it by overtime. But learning the thing under every disadvantage, without a teacher, without the possibility of concentration or complete mental force, without ordinary human sleep, he made himself one of the most rapid reporters then alive. There is a curious contrast between the casualness of the mental training to which his parents and others subjected him, and the savage seriousness of the training to which he subjected himself. Somebody once asked old John Dickens where his son Charles was educated. "Well, really," said the great creature, in a spacious way, "he may be said to have educated himself." He might indeed. This practical intensity of Dickens is worth our dwelling on, because it illustrates an elementary antithesis in his character, or what appears as an antithesis in our modern popular psychology. We are always talking about strong men against weak men, but Dickens was not only both a weak man and a strong man, he was a very weak man and also a very strong man. He was everything that we currently call a weak man. He was a man hung on wires. He was a man who might at any moment cry like a child. He was so sensitive to criticism that one may say that he lacked a skin. He was so nervous that he allowed great tragedies in his life to arise only out of nerves. But in the matter where all ordinary strong men are miserably weak, in the matter of concentrated toil and clear purpose and unconquerable worldly courage, he was like a straight sword. Mrs. Carlyle, who in her human epithets often hit the right nail so that it rang, said of him once, "He has a face made of steel." This was probably felt in a flash when she saw, in some social crowd, the clear, eager face of Dickens cutting through those near him like a knife. Any people who had met him from year to year would each year have found a man weakly troubled about his worldly decline, and each year they would have found him higher up in the world. His was a character very hard for any man of slow and placable temperament to understand. He was the character whom anybody can hurt and nobody can kill. When he began to report in the House of Commons he was still only 19. His father, who had been released from his prison a short time before Charles had been released from his, had also become, among many other things, a reporter. But old John Dickens could enjoy doing anything without any particular aspiration after doing it well. But Charles was of a very different temper. He was, as I have said, consumed with an enduring and almost angry thirst to excel. He learned shorthand with a dark self-devotion as if it were a sacred hieroglyph. Of this self-instruction, as of everything else, he has left humorous and illuminating phrases. He describes how, after he had learned the whole exact alphabet, quote, "there then appeared a procession of new horrors, called arbitrary characters, the most despotic characters I have ever known, who insisted, for instance, that a thing like the beginning of a cobweb meant expectation, and that a pen and ink skyrocket stood for disadvantageous." End quote. He concludes, "It was almost heart-breaking." But it is significant that somebody else, a colleague of his, concluded, "There never was such a shorthand writer." Dickens succeeded in becoming a shorthand writer, succeeded in becoming a reporter, succeeded ultimately in becoming a highly effective journalist. He was appointed as a reporter of the speeches in Parliament, first by the True Sun, then by the Mirror of Parliament, and last by the Morning Chronicle. He reported the speeches very well, and, if we must analyse his internal opinions, much better than they deserved. For it must be remembered that this lad went into the reporters' gallery full of the triumphant radicalism which was then the rising tide of the world. He was, it must be confessed, very little overpowered by the dignity of the Mother of Parliaments. He regarded the House of Commons much as he regarded the House of Lords, as a sort of venerable joke. It was perhaps while he watched, pale with weariness from the reporters' gallery, that there sank into him a thing that never left him, his unfathomable contempt for the British Constitution. Then perhaps he heard from the government benches the immortal apologies of the Circumlocution Office. "Then would the noble lord or right honourable gentleman, in whose department it was to defend the Circumlocution Office, put an orange in his pocket and make a regular field day of the occasion. Then would he come down to that house with a slap upon the table and meet the honourable gentleman foot to foot. Then would he be there to tell that honourable gentleman that the Circumlocution Office was not only blameless in this matter, but was commendable in this matter, was extollable to the skies in this matter. Then would he be there to tell that honourable gentleman that although the Circumlocution Office was invariably right and wholly right, it never was so right in this matter. Then would he be there to tell the honourable gentleman that it would have been more to his honour, more to his credit, more to his good taste, more to his good sense, more to half the dictionary of commonplaces, if he had left the Circumlocution Office alone and never approached this matter. Then would he keep one eye upon a coach or crammer from the Circumlocution Office below the bar, and smash the honourable gentleman with the Circumlocution Office account of this matter. And although one of two things always happened, namely, either that the Circumlocution Office had nothing to say, and said nothing, or that it had something to say of which the noble lord or right honourable gentleman blundered one half and forgot the other. The Circumlocution Office was always voted immaculate by an accommodating majority." We are now generally told that Dickens has destroyed these abuses, and that this is no longer a true picture of public life. Such, at any rate, is the Circumlocution Office account of this matter. But Dickens as a good radical would, I fancy, much prefer that we should continue his battle than that we should celebrate his triumph, especially when it has not come. England is still ruled by the great Barnacle family. Parliament is still ruled by the great Barnacle Trinity, the solemn old Barnacle who knew that the Circumlocution Office was protection, the sprightly young Barnacle who knew that it was a fraud, and the bewildered young Barnacle who knew nothing about it. From these three types our cabinets are still exclusively recruited. People talk of the tyrannies and anomalies which Dickens denounced as things of the past, like the Star Chamber. They believe that the days of the old stupid optimism and the old brutal indifference are gone forever. In truth, this very belief is only the countenance of the old stupid optimism and the old brutal indifference. We believe in a free England and a pure England, because we still believe in the Circumlocution Office account of this matter. Undoubtedly our serenity is widespread. We believe that England is really reformed. We believe that England is really democratic. We believe that English politics are free from corruption. But this general satisfaction of ours does not show that Dickens has beaten the Barnacles. It only shows that the Barnacles have beaten Dickens. It cannot be too often said, then, that we must read into young Dickens and his works this old radical tone towards institutions. That tone was a sort of happy impatience, and when Dickens had to listen for hours to the speech of the noble lord in defence of the Circumlocution Office, when, that is, he had to listen to what he regarded as the last vapourings of a vanishing oligarchy, the impatience rather predominated over the happiness. His incurably restless nature found more pleasure in the wandering side of journalism. He went about wildly in post-chaises to report political meetings for the Morning Chronicle. And what gentlemen they were to serve, he exclaimed, in such things at the old Morning Chronicle, great or small it did not matter. I've had to charge for half a dozen breakdowns in half a dozen times as many miles. I've had to charge for the damage of a great coat from the drippings of a blazing wax candle in riding through the smallest hours of the night in a swift flying carriage and pair." And again, "I have often transcribed for the printer from my shorthand notes important public speeches in which the strictest accuracy was required, and a mistake in which would have been to a young man severely compromising, writing on the palm of my hand by the light of a dark lantern in a post-chaise and four, galloping through a wild country and through the dead of the night, at the then surprising rate of 15 miles an hour. The whole